There's niggas up north is bitches.
Why you say that?
On my daily butterfly, they bitches folk. On my daily butterfly, cause look, all these niggas folk that be portraying that image folk, I done jumped they gate and beat them on my daily butterfly like real life, like.
Trigger ain't know that he's finna get hit with them 3 shots.
Those words spoken by his own brother would describe what was supposed to be a moment of mourning at a repass, but instead turned into an absolute massacre. This is FYB Trigger, a 25-year-old Chicago drill rapper and father of 2 who would be shot and killed on May 30th, 2022 at a location he considered his safe haven. Just hours before his death, he had posted his exact whereabouts on Instagram while flashing guns and throwing gang signs for the camera. When news of the shooting broke, everyone naturally assumed that an op had caught him lacking after seeing that post. But as it turned out, the shooter was not a rival at all. Now, before we get to that betrayal, let me take you back to December 31st, 1996, the day Khalil Quincy Austin entered this world, and together we will uncover how a single habit he could not break would ultimately cost him everything. FYB Trigger was born Khalil Quincy Austin and raised on Chicago's South Side, which meant he was surrounded by the city's brutal gang politics from the very beginning. Growing up around areas like the Calumet buildings and 63rd Street, Trigger found himself exposed to violence long before he could even understand what he was witnessing. In neighborhoods like these, childhood friends would become enemies overnight simply because they lived on the wrong block or chose to wear the wrong colors. Eventually, he found his place within the FYB Collective, which stands for Fuck Yo Block, a crew that had been founded around 2011 by FYB J Main. The collective had roots tied to Bebe Gang, also known as BBG 043, and on paper, FYB looked like a tight unit. After all, everyone rocked the same 3 letters in front of their names, showed up to the same funerals, and claimed loyalty to the set. But as we will soon discover, those 3 letters did not mean what they appeared to mean. Unlike many of his peers, Trigger was never really about the music industry game. Sure, he released tracks here and there, and his 2022 album Free Smoke Volume 2 featured songs like Choppa Scream and Who Wants Smoke. However, with fewer than 500 monthly Spotify listeners, commercial success was clearly not where his priorities lay. The streets were what mattered to him. And what made his name ring out in those Chicago circles was not his music at all, but rather something else entirely. You see, Trigger had built a reputation for one very specific behavior that would follow him everywhere he went: taking pikes. For those who might be unfamiliar with the slang, taking pikes means stealing guns, usually from associates, but sometimes from rivals as well. And when it came to this particular activity, Trigger was absolutely notorious for it. This was not some isolated incident that happened once or twice, but rather a consistent pattern of behavior that defined how people interacted with him. During a 2021 interview, Trigger himself bragged openly about this behavior to the public. He claimed that he had robbed and beaten Young Pappy, a prominent GD rapper from PBG who had been killed back in 2015.
There's niggas up north is bitches.
Why you say that?
On my daily butterfly, they bitches folk. On my daily butterfly, cause look, all these niggas folk that be portraying that image folk, I done jumped they gate and beat them on my daily butterfly like real life, like Pappy, Tavion, on my daily brother, took they pipe, beat Tavion with a 4 nick on my daily brother, beat his ass with the nick, bow, bow, jump Pappy gate for like 350 in a pipe. These niggas is hoes, and they never got their get back on my daily brother.
On top of that, he also claimed that he had pistol whipped Tay Savage, Pappy's brother, while taking his gun along with $350 right on Pappy's own block. The major problem with this reputation, however, is that it did not only apply to rivals. Trigger would take guns from his own homies just as readily as he would from enemies. FBG Butta, who later revealed that Trigger was actually his blood brother, shared a story that perfectly illustrated just how predictable this behavior had become within their circle. One early morning, a young homie showed up to a spot near 63rd Street carrying a 21-shot pistol. Before the kid could even get comfortable, Butta and several others pulled him aside to warn him directly about what was coming.
Should I write them tell Shorty before Trigger pull up? Like, man, you know, folks take pipes. Don't pull your pipe out. Now, we get there. Now, you gotta keep that in mind. They already told him. Don't pull your pipe out. Now we remind y'all.
Despite receiving multiple warnings from people who knew exactly what would happen, the young man ignored every single one of them. When Trigger eventually asked to see the gun, the young man handed it right over without hesitation. What happened next was entirely predictable to everyone watching. Trigger rocked around into the chamber, pointed the weapon directly at the kid, and told him to back up before he got shot.
Damn, you ain't got one up. I ain't got one in here. Trigger throw one up in here. He get the fuck back before I pop your ass. I'm Archie. I keep that. I'm saying it ain't so. Oh. Now Shorty, he getting that. He stopped playing. Now Trigger get that. On Archie, nigga, I ain't playing with your ass, nigga, on BB.
This was simply the environment that Trigger operated in, and everyone around him understood exactly what time it was whenever he walked into a room. They expected this behavior from him, prepared for it, and some had even started carrying backup guns, specifically because they knew Trigger might try something. FBG J-Main himself would later admit that Trigger had warned him repeatedly about this dangerous habit over the years. You cannot keep taking people's guns and expect that nothing will ever happen, he would tell him. But despite all of these warnings, Trigger simply would not stop. Memorial Day weekend of 2022 would go on to become the deadliest in Chicago since 2007, with 51 shootings and 9 deaths recorded across the city. And for FYB specifically, this weekend would prove devastating, as the crew lost 2 of their own members in the span of just 72 hours. The tragedy began on May 28th, when FYB DJ was killed during a territorial shootout in Inglewood. Just 2 days after, on May 30th, the remaining FYB members gathered together to mourn their fallen brother. For this vigil, they chose to meet at 1306 East 93rd Street, which was the former home of another deceased FYB member named Archie. This particular spot was considered a safe haven by the crew, a place where they could relax without constantly watching their backs. Trigger arrived at the gathering alongside Monte, Thad, Benji, and an older FYB member who hadn't been around the crew much lately. By all accounts, Trigger was already high on pills and lean by the time he got there, which meant his reactions were dulled and his judgment was compromised from the start. And then, in a move that would later be scrutinized by everyone following the case, Trigger pulled out his phone and posted his exact location on Instagram story for the world to see.
My big brother. On my daughter, we out for my big brother. We ain't trying to talk. So great. We gonna get it back. We gonna walk a nigga down straight.
The video showed armed affiliates throwing gang signs while issuing direct challenges to their enemies. Anyone watching that night, whether friend or foe, now knew exactly where FYB was posted. But what happened next had absolutely nothing to do with rivals tracking his location through social media. The danger was already inside the house. Remember that older FYB member who showed up to the vigil that night? The one who hadn't been active with the crew lately? Well, it turns out there was serious bad blood simmering between them, and this was not the kind of tension that comes from rival gangs or street beefs with outsiders. This was deeply personal. The exact nature of what sparked this resentment varies depending on who tells the story. Some accounts suggest that the older member had been snitching on someone within the crew, feeding information to people who shouldn't have had it. Other accounts claims that he had been messaging Trigger's girlfriend, crossing a line that simply could not be uncrossed. Both of these rumors circulated heavily in the aftermath of what happened, and while the specific trigger remains unclear, what everyone agrees on is that these two men were absolutely not cool with each other, even if they pretended otherwise when others were watching. And Trigger, impaired by the pills and lean coursing through his system, apparently decided that this vigil for his dead homie was the perfect time to address these issues. Without warning, he grabbed the older man's gun and pointed it directly at him. Now think back to what we discussed in part 1. Trigger had done this exact thing to countless people over the years. He had taken guns from rivals and he had taken guns from homies alike. In most situations, people simply let it happen because that was just Trigger being Trigger, and everyone had learned to accept it as part of dealing with him. But this particular time turned out to be different from all the others. The older man had come prepared with a second gun, a backup piece that Trigger had no idea he was carrying. And the very moment that Trigger pointed that stolen gun at his chest, the older man reached for his backup and opened fire.
Trigger ain't know he had that other gun on him. He had another gun on him. Up that gun, hit Trigger 3 times. That's how that shit played out, bro. He upped that other gun, hit Trigger 3 times.
One struck Trigger in the chest, another caught him in the side, and the third hit him in the groin. When J-Main later reflected on those shots, he described them as completely intentional rather than merely defensive. His reasoning was straightforward. If you shoot a man 3 times in the upper body, you're not just trying to stop a threat, you wanted him dead. Despite taking 3 bullets to his body, Trigger was somehow not finished. Whether it was pure adrenaline pumping through his veins or raw survival instinct kicking in, he managed to start firing back at his attacker. But here's where the situation became truly devastating for everyone involved. In the chaos and confusion of that moment, Trigger missed the shooter entirely. Instead of hitting the man who had just shot him, his bullets tore into his own crew members who were standing nearby. Monte got hit by the gunfire, Thad got hit as well, and perhaps most seriously, Benji took a round directly to his chest, leaving him in critical condition and fighting for his life. In the aftermath, J-Main would speculate about why Trigger ended up shooting at his own people during those frantic seconds. Perhaps in the shock and confusion of suddenly being shot, Trigger believed he was being set up by everyone in the room.
He like, fuck it, shit, y'all trying to set me up in this bitch. It feel like a backdoor shit, motherfucker just shot me.
Whatever the true reason was, by the time the gunfire finally stopped, 4 FYB members lay bleeding and one of them was actively dying. Trigger's girlfriend immediately rushed him to Trinity Hospital in a desperate attempt to save his life. Unfortunately, he was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The others who were caught in the crossfire ultimately survived their wounds. Benji, despite sustaining that critical chest wound, eventually pulled through after receiving emergency care. Monte recovered from his injuries but reportedly faced legal issues in the aftermath. Thad stabilized and was released as well. As for the shooter, no arrests were ever made in connection with the incident. In the days and weeks that followed the shooting, the truth about what really happened that night slowly emerged through a series of interviews and social media posts from FYB members themselves. J-Main, in particular, was remarkably candid about the internal nature of the killing when he spoke publicly about it. He made it absolutely clear that this was not some gang hit orchestrated by outside rivals. One of the key pieces of evidence supporting this was the deafening silence from opposing camps. In Chicago, when you catch a body on your enemy, you typically claim credit for it online as a way of boosting your reputation. But in this case, no ops said a word, which told its own story about where the threat had actually come from.
Yeah, niggas got the same 3 letters in front of their name, but at the same time, niggas don't be together for real, because if they was, none of that shit would've just played out, bro.
J-Main went on to admit that despite what it looked like from the outside, the FYB crew was never as unified as it appeared to be. Various members had been feeling some type of way about each other for years, harboring resentments that never got resolved. The 3 letters in front of their names turned out to be little more than a facade that hid the fractures underneath. Meanwhile, FYB Lil Mike took his speculation even further when he suggested that there may have been broader FYB involvement in the killing beyond just the individual shooter. He pointed to various diss tracks where other FYB members had been subtly calling Trigger out, as well as unresolved beefs within the group that had been festering for years.
He did an interview speaking on folks, like, don't be doing that, bro.
You motherfuckers spoke up.
Another thing he said in a song, he said something like FYB was mad, speaking on Trigger, and then he said they the ones that blanked him.
When reflecting on his own role, J-Mane expressed deep regret about not being more direct with Trigger about the dangers of his pipe-taking habit.
But I always told him, folks, slow down, woo, but you can't tell no nigga like, yeah, woo, but it ain't like I'm trying to jinx a motherfucker, so I ain't over tell him, you know, like, yeah, don't be taking pipes, your ass gonna get killed doing that shit. You know, I never told him that shit.
And then there was one final detail that made the entire tragedy even more senseless. According to multiple reports, Trigger actually had 2 guns on his own person that night.
And I don't understand. I heard Trigger had guns on him. I heard he had 2 pipes on him. So you got 2 pipes on you, and you still trying to take another nigga gun? Like, you being greedy now. You know what I'm talking about?
Now, we tend to focus obsessively on the social media angle in these deaths because it fits a clean narrative that we can understand and learn from. Celebrities share their location online, criminals track them down using that information, celebrities get robbed or killed as a direct result. We saw this exact narrative play out when PNB Rock was shot and killed at a restaurant in Los Angeles in September of 2022, just a few months after Trigger's death. The Philadelphia rapper, whose real name was Rakeem Allen, had been dining at Roscoe's House of Chicken and Waffles with his girlfriend when a gunman approached their table, demanded jewelry, and shot him multiple times. He was only 30 years old when he died. In the immediate aftermath, public outcry focused almost entirely on the fact that his girlfriend had posted a photo of their meal on Instagram while tagging the restaurant's location. Major outlets like NBC News ran stories suggesting the post led the killer directly to them, and figures across the hip-hop community lamented the dangers of sharing locations online. But when the case actually went to trial in 2024, a far more complicated picture emerged. The court proceedings revealed that an insider named Tremont Jones had actually tipped off the robbery crew about PNB Rock's presence and the valuable jewelry he was wearing. It was not the Instagram post itself that brought the killers to that restaurant, but rather someone in or near PNB Rock's circle who knew his movements and saw an opportunity. The man who orchestrated the robbery, Freddie Lee Trone, was ultimately convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 31 years to life in prison. The parallel to Trigger's case is striking. In both situations, social media was initially blamed for leading killers to their victims, and in both situations, deeper investigation revealed that the actual threat came from people who were already close enough to cause harm without needing to check Instagram. A similar dynamic played out in the murder of Pop Smoke back in February of 2020, although that case did have a more direct social media connection. The Brooklyn robber, who was only 20 years old at the time, accidentally revealed the address of the Hollywood Hills home where he was staying when he posted photos showing gift bags with the location printed on them. A group of home invaders used that information to target the residence, and Pop Smoke was shot and killed during the robbery that followed. In that instance, the social media exposure was more directly responsible for what happened. The killers explicitly used the posted information to find their target. But even there, the aftermath revealed complexities that the initial headlines missed. 4 people eventually pleaded guilty to charges related to the murder, and the investigation uncovered how quickly opportunists can mobilize when they see vulnerability. What connects all 3 of these cases, from Trigger to PNB Rock to Pop Smoke, is that the simple explanations we reach for in the immediate aftermath rarely capture the full picture. We want to believe that if rappers would just stop posting their locations, they would be safe, but the reality is far messier. Sometimes the danger is tracking you through a screen, or maybe sitting right next to you. And sometimes, as in Trigger's case, the danger has been building for years among people you thought were your brothers. The shooting at that vigil did not destroy FYB as a collective, but it exposed the cracks that had been there all along in ways that could not be ignored. J-Mane continued making music and doing interviews in the months that followed, but his tone noticeably shifted when discussing the crew and loyalty in the streets. He spoke more openly than ever about the reality of street affiliations, about how people who claim the same set can turn on each other at any moment, and about proximity does not automatically equal trust. Meanwhile, rivals wasted absolutely no time capitalizing on the tragedy for their own purposes. Tay Savage, who Trigger had publicly claimed to have robbed and pistol-whipped years earlier, mocked the death openly on social media. Old beefs that Trigger had started with his boasting came back around in the most vicious way possible. And of course, Chicago's drill scene continued losing young men at a terrifying and heartbreaking rate. FBG Duck was gunned down in broad daylight in 2020. King Von was killed in an Atlanta altercation that same year. The list of names kept growing longer, and FYB Trigger became just another addition to that grim roster. Behind all of the street reputation and the viral moments and the endless speculation, Khalil Quincy Austin was a human being with people who loved him. He was 25 years old when he died. He had 2 young children who will now grow up without their father. His girlfriend had to make that desperate drive to the hospital with his bleeding body in her car, only to watch him slip away. His mother, who reportedly worked as a defense attorney in Chicago, had spent years navigating her son's legal troubles and trying to keep him out of the worst consequences of the life he was living. She knew the risks he was taking. She understood the world he was operating in. And despite all of that knowledge and all of that effort, she still lost him. FBG Butta, his blood brother, expressed his devastation publicly on social media in the days after the shooting. The grief was raw and unfiltered, serving as a reminder that behind every headline about another slain rapper is a family that has been torn apart. The moral of this story extends far beyond simple advice about social media safety or the dangers of substance abuse. It's about the fundamental fragility of trust in environments that have been defined by violence for generations. When everyone around you has been conditioned from childhood to survive by any means necessary, loyalty becomes conditional and brotherhood becomes transactional. FYB Trigger learned that lesson in the hardest way imaginable. What do you think about this case? Do you also think Trigger had his death coming? Let me know what you think in the comments section. Click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this.